Welcome to session 3 of a series working through Merwe's A Biblical Hebrew Reference Grammar. In this video, we'll be looking at sections 10 through 13, which discuss key terms that will reappear throughout our study of Biblical Hebrew grammar. In section 10, Merwe describes important topics related to language structure. These topics are relevant to the study of any language, but are used differently in each respective one. The phonetic aspect of a language refers to the types of sounds. The phonological aspect refers to the specific sounds and the combination of sounds a particular language uses to make meaning. Morphology refers to the specific shapes of words that convey meaning. For example, prefixes and suffixes are frequently added to words in Biblical Hebrew in order to convey various types of information. Syntax refers to the way a language combines words to make larger units of meaning, such as phrases, clauses, and sentences. Semantic analysis describes how a word or phrase contributes to the meaning of a sentence. Pragmatics does something different, similar, but considers the social reasons behind a particular construction of the language. For example, a king can make certain statements that a peasant simply can't. While semantics and pragmatics are not identical categories, Merwe treats them together unless there is an important reason to distinguish between the two. Merwe employs the traditional, morphologically based grammatical categories in his grammar because his goal is to help students understand Biblical Hebrew. However, the discussion of traditional categories is informed by aspects of more modern approaches to word categories in language. Merwe lists 10 categories of words in Biblical Hebrew, and each of these will be dealt with in greater detail in the book and in this series, so we won't spend any time on them today. Before we can get a grasp on the unique features of sentences in Biblical Hebrew, we need a working knowledge of what makes a sentence in general. A sentence is defined as a group of words having at minimum a subject and a predicate. Additionally, it communicates a complete thought. A sentence is made up by a series of words called phrases. Individual words may be combined into meaningful units that are smaller than a sentence, however. Merwe identifies four such possibilities. In this example sentence, we see that the dogs is a noun phrase. Ran fast is a verb phrase. When they barked is an adverbial phrase. And at the mailman is a prepositional phrase. A clause is made up of phrases. It may be a complete sentence or it may be an incomplete sentence, such as a subordinate clause. Joseph knows is an example of a clause that makes a complete sentence. That the Lord will help him is a subordinate clause. So it's a clause, but it does not represent a complete sentence on its own. There are different types of verbs we need to be familiar with as well. First, an intransitive verb is a verb that does not require an additional phrase like a direct object. Joseph sleeps cannot take a direct object. Bob laughs cannot take a direct object. So both are intransitive verbs. Additional phrases are not needed to make these sentences complete. Second, a transitive verb requires an additional phrase. For example, the word summarizes requires a direct object. What does he summarize? He summarizes a book. Lucy is scared takes a prepositional phrase to explain what she is scared of. And John knows requires an additional phrase to explain the content of John's knowledge. This can even be a subordinate clause. A complement is a phrase that must be used in order for the sentence to make sense. For example, we need to know what Joseph summarizes to have a complete picture of the thought. He summarizes a book. On the other hand, an adjunct is a phrase that is not required for the sentence to make sense. For example, we do not need to know where John sleeps for us to understand that John does indeed sleep. Now that we have a basic grasp of sentences, we can consider unique features of sentences in Biblical Hebrew. First, Hebrew does not have to have an explicit subject. For example, katav means he wrote. It's a complete sentence by itself. The subject is indicated by the morphology of the verb. Second, Biblical Hebrew is not constrained by word order. There are many examples when the different parts of the sentence are arranged differently for a variety of reasons. The most prominent order is verb, subject, object, as seen here in Genesis 1, verse 1. However, we can observe other orders like this example from Deuteronomy 10, verse 20, which has the object first and then the verb. The subject in this example is only morphologically indicated, it's not explicitly there. Third, Hebrew has something called nominal clauses. These are sentences in which the to be verb is not explicitly stated but implied. Imagine the sentence, John is great, without the actual presence of the word is. That's what happens in nominal clauses in biblical Hebrew. John, great, implies that the sentence is actually John is great. There are three main types of sentences. First, simple sentences consist of one independent clause. Hebrew has four major types of simple sentences: nominal or verbless sentences, we just discussed, statements, interrogatives, and commands. Second, extended sentences occur when one part of the clause is expanded. For example, John, who is tall, plays basketball. Who is tall is not necessary, but expands our understanding of one aspect of the sentence, namely the subject, John. Third, complex sentences are made up of multiple clauses, which may be either dependent or independent. Words combine to make phrases, and phrases combine to make sentences, and sentences combine to make whole text. Every language combines sentences according to their own conventions. Two major categories for understanding this are textual cohesion and rhetorical organization. Vander Merwe identifies two important features in biblical Hebrew that contribute to the cohesion of a text. First, biblical Hebrew uses names and details repetitively. In English, we might introduce Elijah, the man of God, at the beginning of the story, and then just refer to Elijah by name or by a pronoun the rest of the time. Hebrew is often much more repetitive. It will say Elijah, the man of God, over and over again. Second, whereas English uses pronouns instead of repeating names unnecessarily, Hebrew uses proper names extensively. It does use pronouns, but it's very happy to continue using the same name. For example, when we say John ran to Bob and Bob ran back to him. In English, we know that him is referring back to John. Well, in Hebrew, it might be something like John ran to Bob and Bob ran back to John. Texts are organized towards a particular end. Here are four options Vander Merwe lists: narrative text, descriptive text, argumentative text, and prescriptive text. The language will combine in interesting ways to accomplish each of these goals. Well, thanks for watching, and if you're interested in Biblical Hebrew, make sure you check out these other videos where we continue walking through Vander Merwe's A Biblical Hebrew Reference Grammar, or take this other video about learning biblical vocabulary.